And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents here on Amazon.com. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again. If you guys are new to us here on Amazon Live, though, make sure you guys do hit that follow button. You'll see it either here in this corner or down below. You also will see the book by our next guest. We're so excited to welcome Natasha S. Alford to our broadcast today. She's celebrating the brand new release of her book, American Negra. You guys can see my copy here. You all can be able to get it for yourselves today. Also, we are simulcasting our broadcast, so I see you guys already coming in on Facebook and Twitter. We welcome you guys. We also are on YouTube as well as LinkedIn as well. So if you guys are not joining us on the Amazon platform, there is a link that will bring you guys over to Amazon to purchase a book for yourself. I want to talk to Natasha not only about the journey of sharing her own story, but also the journey into herself to be able to not only be able to show her own worth, but also let other people know their value as well. We also will let you guys know how to stay connected with Natasha too. Natasha, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, Cyrus, it is so great to be here. It's pub day. I'm so excited. This is amazing.
Well, look, I was just saying to you before we went live to you, hello, Manswell. Good to be able to see you over on the Facebook side. I'm just saying, hope you get a chance. I know it's hard to be able to take this all in. So I thought it was really interesting. I had a chance to get an advanced reader copy of the book, so I got a chance to read it before our conversation today, Natasha. So I have a lot to talk to you about. But the thing I thought was so interesting, and I want to ask you about, what has it been like for you to go from covering stories to now being the story?
It's a transition. I think that there's an appeal in journalism if you're a private person, right? But
Mhm.
you also sort of are interested in being visible. So you get to be visible. People know your byline. Maybe they see you interviewing people, but they don't necessarily know you. And
Mhm.
so this required vulnerability. It required being honest about some of the challenges that I've faced in life, and also just moving away from the need to be perfect, the need to always be polished. And I hope that that frees other people who are reading the book, who maybe were cultivated in the same way, who were told that, they had to work really hard, or they were sort of trained to be ambitious and successful, and they define that a certain in a certain traditional way. I hope it frees people up to just be more human. And so, yeah, it was a transition, but it was worth it.
Yeah, when you were just saying that, I thought about a scene that you wrote about in the book. When you're kind of going through a Q&A, and it's almost like a ping pong match, right? Of making sure you say the right thing, you're able to answer the questions, and feel like you're able to show them who you are. But even in one instance where you felt like things did not go well, you realize it actually turned out for your good. That you were actually able to get what you wanted. Is that kind of one of the big lessons for yourself? That like you were just saying, Natasha, that none of us really get it all the way right. No one's going to ever be completely satisfied with every answer we give as to, why don't you speak this language? Why don't you do this? Why don't you, what? So is that kind of part of the lesson for you and for the reader, that to just be comfortable with themselves?
Absolutely. That is part of the lesson. And I think here's one of the downsides of being successful, quote unquote, when you are young, or,
Mm,
doing really well and exceeding. You may feel like you have to maintain that standard. You may
yeah.
be less likely to want to take risks because people are so used to you being at the top of your game in whatever particular area you are in, or whatever area you may dominate. And
Mhm.
so what I want people to know is that it's a growth mindset that actually allows you to learn or to just enjoy learning. And there were so many periods in my life where maybe on paper it looked like I had it together or I was on a successful track, but deep down I wasn't happy because I wasn't able to be free. I was almost caged in a way by that perfection, by that need to achieve and succeed. And I think this is really, really salient for young people of color, because we're often told, particularly Black people, that we have to be twice as good due to discrimination in society, due to stereotypes about our community. And so, we think that through excellence, we'll somehow overcome that. Well, I'm here to tell you that sometimes, even when you check those boxes and you are quote unquote excellent, people are still going to question you and still
Yeah.
try to undermine you. So we should not find our worth or our value in that outside validation. It really starts from inside.
Yeah. How much of this for you, though, began at home, Natasha? Because I got a sense from the book that knowing history, knowing your history, knowing your roots, and knowing that it was okay to embrace all of you are, it seems to start early. How much do you think the person you are today is because of who you were raised to be?
Definitely, the all those seeds were planted.
Hmm.
I'm certainly a manifestation of my mother, my father, and also, you know, the strengths and the weaknesses, right? I laugh because at a certain point in the book, I talk about certain tensions I had with my father, and my mother
Hmm.
would say, "It's because you're so much alike." Right. So our childhoods shape us, our family environment shapes us. And absolutely what my parents taught me early helped me to be the person that I am. But I think that, you know, it was um, this belief in education that really, really was a theme throughout my life. And that's part of why there's an apple on the cover of the book, because this book is about the pursuit of education.
Hmm.
So redefining it for yourself. Education is not just about getting the straight A's or getting into a certain institution. It's about the power of knowledge, and what do you do once you have that knowledge?
Yeah. There were parts of the book, I have to be honest with you, Natasha, and you may have heard this from someone else, but since Chicago makes a reference in the book, I can bring this up. I thought about Barack Obama when I was reading this book a lot.
Really?
And
Wow.
yeah, because I thought about how, one of his most famous speeches, I think, is where he talked about not disowning one part of himself.
Mhm.
And I love the fact when you mentioned education, I thought about what you said about Harvard. And what was so interesting when you guys get to that in the book, what I love that you did, Natasha, is talk about the history I didn't know of, and how individuals that came before you, how they were treated, when they were able to, to achieve something like that. Talk to us about what that was like for you to, thinking about a place like Harvard and thinking about all that that meant to be there, but also what it meant and didn't mean for so many before you.
Yes, if you pick up this book, you will learn a lot of history
Yeah.
about the diaspora. You know, in many ways, the memoir is just a vehicle for teaching history. I'm like a teacher at heart. And I think sometimes if we put the label history, people might think, oh, that's boring. But when you make it a part of someone's story, it helps you to understand the person, but also society better. And so,
Mhm.
yes, Harvard has this label of being the number one school, but it was built on the backs of slave labor, right? A lot of the money that came into that institution came from the riches and spoils of enslaving African people. And so I wanted people to know that history, to demystify it a bit. You know, we put so many of these institutions and brands and celebrities on a pedestal without thinking about the larger context. And so, yes, places like Harvard, Yale, Georgetown, you know, they all benefited from slavery, but that doesn't disappear just because a law changes. And I
Yeah.
also think that's kind of our problem in America right now. We believe that just because a law technically changed, you know, in 1863 or whatever date you want to throw out, that somehow the hearts and minds of people have been completely cleansed, or that we ever really truly dealt with the roots of racism. And so this goes to show that even throughout the decades, as more Black people start to go to Harvard University, they still encounter challenges that have to be worked around.
Such a great point. I want to say, I see you guys over on the Amazon side. If you guys have any questions on Amazon, make sure you guys put those in the comment section. It is open over there. Also, we do have the book highlighted for you guys on the Amazon side. So I see you guys have already been clicking through. Feel free to be able to make sure not only when you add it to your cart, don't forget to check out as well. But again, our guest is Natasha S. Alford today. We're talking with her not only about her brand new book, American Negra, but also what it's been like for her to share her story, but also, I think, great lessons for all of us along the way. Again, we do welcome you guys tuning in on the social media platforms as well. If you all have any questions or comments for Natasha, you can put those in the chat as well. I mentioned Chicago earlier, Natasha. I want to talk about that, what you wrote about, because it was interesting seeing you talk about being embraced in there, but also, of course, the questions that come up. And I thought, some people, when they get to that part of the book, they will definitely be able to relate to, talking about, well, why don't you speak this, or you should be able to speak this, or if you're going to embrace this, then this is what you should be able to do. I think it's so interesting how even sometimes people who look like us will try to put us in boxes. I went through that in school growing up in the South. People tell me, well, you don't talk black enough. Why don't you talk
Mm.
blacker? And I thought that's a very odd thing. I'm a black person who talks. I don't know how you talk. It's supposed to talk. So, what was
Mhm.
it like for you to kind of think about that as you were writing that part of the book? And not that it is in the past necessarily, because it may still happen, but to think about what people expect of you based on not only who you embrace to yourself to be, but also who you are embracing as your culture.
Yes. Well, when people get to that scene in the book, you will see that sometimes it is people outside of a culture who can uphold stereotypes, right? So in that case, it was a fellow Black American person who was like, "Oh, aren't you supposed to be able to do X, Y, and Z if you're a
Hmm.
Latina?" Right? And that was based on stereotypes that they heard. I
Right.
also reference the great, director Spike Lee. One of his movies, Crooklyn. There's this scene where there's she's a Black girl. I don't know her ethnicity, but she's looking at another girl and she's like, "Hey, you got Puerto Rican hair." Well, technically there's no such thing as Puerto Rican hair because Puerto Ricans come in all races, right? I've seen Puerto Ricans
Right.
with locks. I've seen Puerto Ricans with cornrows, 4C hair. So we often have stereotypes of other cultures that sort of uphold and maintain a certain perception of that culture. And so
Yeah.
what I'm calling on people to do is to suspend some of those assumptions, to be open to learning, to be curious, to look for diversity, even within certain groups. And for Black Americans, I think this is important right now as we look at
Mhm.
election 2024, because we often hear about the Black vote when it comes to politics. And in truth, there's so much diversity within the Black community, both politically, socioeconomically, faith wise, even generationally. And so this book calls on us to just have more nuanced conversations. And even when people try to project certain expectations on you, I hope people feel seen and know that it is okay to just be yourself. You do not have to perform.
Love that. I began this conversation, Natasha, talking with you about, being in journalism and now being the story. I want to go back to that. But when you just mentioned Spike Lee, I thought about something in the beginning of the book, and that is your love of hip hop that comes through in this book as well. There's a
Yes,
lot
can't
of
help
hip
it.
hop references in this book. Talk to us about the role of hip hop for you and what it's been like for you to kind of chronicle your journey with hip hop.
Well, I came up in the bottle popping era. This was
Mhm.
Jay-Z,
Yeah.
Rockefeller, Ludacris. I mean, we had quite a run those early 2000s for hip hop.
Mhm.
But I reflect on being a Black girl during this time and just
Mhm.
what it felt like to see the ways in which misogyny was so interwoven into the culture. And mind you, it didn't have to be. Those early days of hip hop, the things that were rapped about weren't necessarily insulting to an entire population of women, right? It was about having fun. It was about talking about the truth of what we see in our communities.
Mhm.
Think about the message in Grandmaster Flash. Well, I grew up in the era of hypersexualized hip hop. And so this book also talks about the intersectionality of girlhood. As
Mhm.
well as race and ethnicity, because
Yeah.
being a girl during this time there was a lot of pressure again to be hypersexual, but at the same time to also be virginal. These like contradictions that we had going on. And so hip hop, I felt like, was one of the tools of misogyny at the time. And you will get to a point in the book where you see I kind of push back on that in a big way. And there's actually video footage of what happens. I give a speech. I will give you that spoiler.
Mhm.
But I felt at the time really lonely speaking out about misogyny in hip hop. It wasn't like a cool thing to do. And I feel like there's been some evolution in the conversation. Like we've been more willing to be critical of the ways in which hip hop has served us and the ways that it has not. So I hope that continues.
Yeah, and I think it goes to what you're saying about not being monolithic. I think, just because, you may have come up at a certain time or it doesn't mean you're going to like everything, and I think that's the other side of it too. And I love the fact that you're able to ship because that again is another one of those things that people will relate to. I think we all kind of have this thing when it comes to music in our lives and making those connections, but also making us think about who we are in the world. So journalism, talk to us about that. Looking back at it now, Natasha, was that almost inevitable for you that sharing stories in some form would be a part of your life?
Yeah, I should have always been a journalist. I'll
Yeah.
just say that, right? You know what happens though, and this is what I hope people listen to as they look at the way this story unfolds. I said I wanted to be a journalist. I was, the co-editor of the school newspaper in high school, and I went off to college saying I want to achieve this goal. But when I got there, I started to follow other people's example. I started to look around me and say, "Oh, this is how these people define success." And success there was working in finance, making a lot of money on Wall Street. That's what everybody thought was exciting. It was not taking a no pay internship to go, struggle in journalism. That seemed like a luxury that I didn't have. And so I made some choices that took me on a different path away from what could have really been my passion. But that's okay. This winding path is why we have this book and this testimony about it's never too late to go back and do what you really were meant to do. I didn't become a journalist or pursue journalism until I was about 27. I didn't actually go back to school for it until then. And so some people might say that's too late. And even some people discouraged me from making that career pivot. But now, it was all worth it. So if you're home, if you're listening, this is your encouragement to know that it's not too late.
Yeah. I want to talk about the title of the book for a second, America Negra, because I think what I thought by the time I got to the very end of it is that it kind of goes to what we've been talking about in this conversation, Natasha, but I'm curious as to for you what it means. Because for me as the reader, I thought, you know what? For me, I took away from it that it's going to be subjective to every person. What one person looks at as who a person is, who a group is, who a culture is always going to be different than how the person embraces themselves. What was the title like for you to embrace, especially for your book?
There were so many layers to that title. Even in the book, there's a story that connects to that title. So you'll see different ways to interpret it. But essentially, to be negra is just to be a Black woman. It's what a Spanish speaking person might call you. If you're walking through a Spanish speaking neighborhood, somebody might be like, oye, negra, or mira, morena. And some people say it's a term of endearment, which has been contested. But we also know that negra has been hurled as an insult. To call someone negra is to insult them. And so by calling myself or this book, America Negra, it's a reclaiming of that word as a word of pride, to say that I'm proud to be Black in whatever world that I traverse, that I'm always Black, right? Some people will be like, oh, I'm Latino, I'm not Black, and they'll be the same color as me. Well, no matter what, those are Black people wherever they go, whether they see it that way or not. But the American part is really to tell America, look, people like me are here and we are part of the American story. We're part of American history. We're not marginal. We're not an afterthought. We are here and we've been here. And so I wanted to create a portrait of what it was like to live at that intersection so people could start to think about that.
So when you look now at this young lady, and it's a beautiful picture, and I really have enjoyed this conversation with you. What is it like for you to look at her and to be proud of her?
Well, I have to say, even from the time that photo was taken, I've changed. Obviously, you could see my hair. I've started to wear my hair natural pretty much 90% of the time because the effort that it was taking to straighten the hair, to press it every time, I realized this is a lot of effort. It prevents me from doing things like working out or, I wondered when did I feel that I only looked professional when my hair was straight? And I had to really interrogate that. And that was I had written the book and still was wearing my hair straight because I felt like, well, this is what is expected of me. So the journey is still unfolding. I am still learning. I'm still growing every single day. And that's okay. That's part of the message of this book. You don't need to be a finished product. We are all a work in progress. It's just a matter of what are you working towards.
Love that. Such a great message and such a great way for us to end. Again, everyone, Natasha S. Alford has been our guest. America Negra is the book available here on Amazon. You all can be able to go ahead and get your copy of it. Again, for those joining us on the social media sites, you'll see the link there to come over to Amazon to be able to get it for yourself. Natasha, so glad you could share part of your pub day with us today. How can our viewers and listeners stay connected with you, though?
This is really special. I will always remember this conversation because it happened today. So thank you, Cyrus. And everybody who's watching, you can follow me on Natasha S. Alford. That's my X handle. That is my Instagram handle. I'm on Facebook. And go to AmericanNegra.com. You'll see my book tour calendar, I'm traveling. I'm hitting the streets. So I will see you all outside at these beautiful events where we will continue these really rich conversations.
So important. And I have to give a special shout out to our mutual friend, Yona of Riverchild Media, for setting up this chat with us. Yona and I have been friends for over a decade. I'm so glad to be able to have this conversation with you, and definitely looking forward to chatting with you again, Natasha.
Thank you, Cyrus. Thank you, everybody.
All right. We appreciate you. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents. Until next time, you all make it a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.